All right, so here we have a passage question and it's asking for the main purpose, which just means as we read this, we should just kind of keep an open mind and try to notice those strong words that really tell us the most basic version of what the passage is about, right? So connotations are going to be the most basic version. So it's from this book, Balloon. The narrator has recently moved to a new city. As I stepped over the threshold, a surge of disdain washed over me, souring the very air I breathed. So if you don't know disdain, hopefully you know souring. It's bad, right? Think of a lemon as sour. That's not a good sensation usually. The walls, once vibrant with color, now seemed to exude a sickly pallor, mocking my hopes of a fresh start. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a taunt, reminding me of the weight of my decision to uproot our lives. How could I call this place home when it felt more like a prison of my own making? Right, so there are positive words in here, right? We see them in things like vibrant, let's see, it seemed to exude hope of a fresh start, right? So there are definitely positive words. How could I call this place home, right? But notice, every time we have a positive, it's very quickly counteracted with some negative, right? There's a hope of a fresh start, but it's being mocked, right? So that's the thing, it's not just about positives and negatives, it's also about how the context kind of shapes those things, and sometimes we bring up positives to deliberately negate them, and that's what's happening here. The connotation of this passage, clearly negative. So maybe there's more to it than that, but let's sort through these choices and see how those connotations kind of get reflected in the answer choice. So A, it explains the features that the narrator wanted in his new house. Well, if you want something, it sounds positive, so maybe he wanted certain things and didn't get them, but that feels like it would need to be in here, right? So there's only one word in here that really even has a connotation, and it seems to be like a positive. So I don't really think that makes sense with this passage, but let's continue. B, it describes how the narrator feels about his new home. Well, what's interesting about that choice is it has no connotation at all, right? Does he feel good about it? Does he feel bad about it? Well, that choice opens up both options. So I'm going to say that this is a neutral choice because it doesn't really have a connotation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong because it's basically just too vague to take a side. So let's see what else we've got here before we make a decision. C, it demonstrates that the narrator is conflicted about a decision. This is probably the trap answer because we think of the word conflicted as negative, right? Like conflict, right? Think of people fighting. That seems like a bad thing. But if you're conflicted, it's tricky because it almost has both connotations. It means that maybe there's some positive things and some bad things, right? There's things that are good about this move, but also things that are bad. So do you get the sense that there's pros and cons, that there's good and bad here? I don't really. Again, there were good words, but it always seemed like they were being negated, that something, that he had hoped for didn't actually happen. So I don't see a lot of buts, a lot of contrasts of I wanted this and I got something I wanted, but then I didn't get something else. So I don't know. To me, this is a mixed connotation of positive and negative. The passage, though, doesn't really have that mixture. Let's take a look at D. It suggests that the narrator believes the benefits of moving outweigh the downsides. Well, it does talk about downsides, which is negative, but if the benefits outweigh the downsides, this is certainly talking about it in a more positive light. We definitely don't have that. So I would say it's very easy to get rid of A and D here if you're thinking about connotations, because we really need more of a positive passage. We're not getting that. But we have to be careful. I do think that, C is going to be what some of you pick because that word conflicted feels negative. But it's a tricky word, and it is one that we can see in vocab questions as well. It's a good word to know that if you're conflicted, it means you're torn. You don't really have the ability to make up your mind about something. And so there are benefits and downsides, and so that's kind of going to be both connotations. The reason B is right is it allows for the negative passage without taking a side, right? And this is a very common feature in a lot of SAT passages, a lot of SAT questions. We want choices that are weak and vague. And that's exactly what's going on here. And this is why I don't think it's worth your time to summarize these passages in very detailed ways, because a lot of times the right answer is just going to be like this, where they've stripped away the detail. So even our very, very dumb summary of it just being a negative connotation was even more than the answer choice presented to us. And that's okay. It doesn't bother me that the answer choice is an incomplete summary. That's how the SAT works. You've got to get used to that they're going to strip away the details. But if we just get a very basic version, we're more likely to see things that kind of match up. And so just be okay with this. This is why I included this question in this set. It's a good reminder that even with connotations, you might have to kind of strip it down even further. So neutral answer choices might be right, even when the passage has a clear connotation.